I'm Terry Shepard. Being a confident podcast guest is a skill that can be learned. And that's why I wrote How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. It's a sweet and short primer that teaches you about the gear, the appearance, and the messaging that can grab and hold today's micro attention spans and motivate your listeners to take action. How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. The digital version is just $1.99 at Amazon. Grab your copy today and sell more books tomorrow.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
There are some stories that creep up on you slowly. They begin in the quiet corners of memory and places that feel familiar, almost safe. And then, almost imperceptibly, they tilt. What once felt like an inheritance becomes a burden. What once looked like love begins to resemble something far more complicated. Today's conversation lives in that uneasy space. Our guest today is its author, Kirsten Kashock, whose new novel is An Impossibility of Crows. It's been described as literary horror at its most unsettling. A story that lingers, a story that disturbs, and perhaps most strikingly, a story that asks what happens when devotion crosses the line we can't quite see until it's too late. Kirsten Kashock, it's great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
This book feels out of place for a student of poetry and dance. Where did the idea come from?
I am a poet, and I have never had anything come to me this way. I had a dream of a giant crow. One dream, it wasn't recurrent, but he wouldn't let me alone. He said, you have to deal with me. And the story came from that single image, actually.
How did you find dance as a passion?
I grew up dancing. I have 4 siblings, and we had one car growing up. And so we all played soccer together. And then we also all went to the local dance school and all fell in love. People ask me, they're like, how did you all end up doing this? And I say my parents raised exhibitionists, and there was a decent studio in town.
Tell me more about this huge crow that appeared in your dream.
The dream I had was of a crow the size of a horse. And that's a pretty startling dream. But I think what interested me about it was that I was not scared. That was not the feeling. And I was like, how does this come to be? And that led me to the mad scientist idea. I've loved a lot of mad scientist books, starting with Frankenstein. One of my favorites is Ursula Le Guin's The Lathe of Heaven. And I realized that I had never met a female mad scientist. And I thought that they might have different reasons for creating something that could be so terrifying.
Agnes is both a scientist and a deeply emotional character. How did you approach building a protagonist who lives in that intersection of logic and longing?
Wow, that's great. Logic and longing. I started writing on the first page of the book. And at the first page of the book, even though it was prior to the pandemic, the book starts at a moment where she has lost most things. She's lost her parents. She's lost her job. Her husband has taken her child from the house. And that's when you meet her. So she had a lot to long for and to miss. And then I wrote most of this book during the pandemic. And so the feelings of isolation and feeling like you're the only person in the world, even though there are many other characters in the book, she carries that isolation with her, I think. And so she reflects on, and science was the one thing she was ever good at. So losing her job doing that was a real impetus for her to change things up and try her hand at this breeding program that she enters into.
Her experiment is driven by love, but it becomes something much darker. How do you navigate that fine line between care and control?
I am a mother. I'm a mother of 3 sons, and I am also a sister of, there are 5 in my family. So think if you've grown up in any kind of family, you realize that there are those lines, right? There's that line that you are helping too much, or you're not, or neglect, or you're not helping enough, or you're too busy in your own world, or the idea of exaggerating one of those gaps became really meaningful to me. And I also don't think this book is fantastical, but that part is not fantastical. That part is something I think anybody can relate to.
Kirsten Kashock is our guest. An Impossibility of Crows is the book. Her website is KirstenKashock, KirstenKashock.com. The novel explores generational inheritance in a haunting way. What kinds of inheritance were you most interested in examining in this book?
I was most interested in her parents. And when I came to her parents and I wrote things about them, they were familiar to me. But it also surprised me that the inheritance that she receives from her mother is almost poetic. This woman she was an artist. She has a relationship to language and also an obsessive relationship to finding out about the history of South Central Pennsylvania, which is where the novel is set. When I realized her mother had this interest, her journals became this place where I could explore the things that I was learning out about South Central Pennsylvania, which is where I was raised. But the things I was learning about it, I had not been taught at school. And her father was in the Vietnam War. And I have several people in my past who have that background, and she rarely spoke about it. And yet it informs so much of who they were and how they carried themselves in the world.
In many ways, An Impossibility of Crows is a story about motherhood under pressure. What aspects of motherhood did you want to challenge or complicate?
I think many parents come to parenthood without a full plan or any plan at all in some cases, and they can feel ambivalent. And that doesn't mean that there isn't love, but it does sometimes mean that they're not prepared for what that love means or how to express it. And that is definitely Agnes's problem. She loves her daughter deeply. Her daughter was born with a birth defect, and she does not know how to work with that. She wants to solve a problem that her daughter does not see as a problem. And anyone who knows Mina does not see it as a problem. But Agnes feels guilt about it. And the crow is her way of giving her daughter hypermobility.
There is a quiet question running through this story. How far is too far when you're trying to protect someone you love? How did you think about that boundary while you were writing the book?
I didn't think about it. Agnes just kept transgressing it. So I had to follow that lead. One of the other challenges about motherhood is this idea that mothers have to be selfless in a certain way. And Agnes is actually always herself and tries to be a mother as a scientist and do the things as a scientist that will help her daughter. But she never knows where the line is, and she didn't have good models, but I have deep sympathy for her. I think there's a lot of sympathy you can bring to Agnes, but you don't read this book if you want to love the main character. You can love to hate her or love to be frustrated at her. You can love her intellect, but she doesn't make the decisions that I hope the rest of us would make.
We're talking with author Kirsten Kashock about An Impossibility of Crows. The website is KirstenKashock.com. The prose is both lyrical and unsettling to me. How did you develop the voice of the novel to sustain that tension?
That was a real effort on my part. My language is generally more, I won't say florid, but I speak in longer sentences than Agnes tends to. So I very much wanted to make her more scientific in tone. I hang out with scientists. I know a little bit about how they speak. They can go on, but not generally in the same sentence. They divide and conquer. And she can sound very abrupt. And she doesn't tell you what she's feeling, although I think you sense it. But she's not somebody who tells you, I was sad, or I'm unhappy about this, or I was really frustrated. Instead, she just tells you about what she did in response to whatever it is. But it's also in journal format, which helped me develop how her mind works. In a journal, you can follow the train of thought that someone's thinking. And that, I think, communicated her character to me as I started off on the first pages in a way that she has humor, but it's dark. She can be thoughtful, but she stops herself before she considers other people's feelings too much. For many reasons, she's broken a little, I think.
If Agnes could step outside of her own story and look back at it in the rearview mirror, what do you think she'd learned?
She doesn't spend a lot of time with regret, so I don't think she would regret what happened, but I think she would make a vow not to repeat some of her mistakes, given the opportunity.
What has writing the book taught you?
Stuff I think I should already know, but I've become more convinced of it. I think one of the biggest lessons of her story is that the things that we bury do not stay dead. That's very Gothic. You push things down and they do not stay where you try to inter them. And that comes up in a number of ways. Yeah, some of them more literal than others.
One reviewer warned that the book might spoil your appetite. What kind of emotional or physical reaction do you hope readers will get from the book?
I hope that the reader takes away a sense of dread, that pleasurable dread that you have. One of the early reviews, and this actually meant a lot to me, said that they'd actually had a really rough winter, deaths in their family and other things. And I was worried. I'm reading along with the review and I'm like, oh no, this is where they say they had to throw the book across the room. And they said, I didn't want anything light or uplifting or toxically positive. I wanted to feel. And this book was exactly what I needed. And I didn't realize that I would feel such relief. And so there are people like me out there who need the darkness in order to feel better. So,
were there moments when you were writing this book that you were surprised by what was going on the page?
Yes, absolutely. There were. I would write a scene. I'd spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and I call it the woodshed, but it's my attic. And I'd wander down and I'd be like, oh my gosh, what do I have to do tomorrow to deal with what happened today in the book? Yes. I don't think I'd write if it didn't bring me surprise. That's what's one of the pleasures. So I hope I also give surprise to my readers because there were turns in here that I wasn't expecting.
You're the mother of 3 with a very full life. How do you find time to write?
I started seriously writing the week before my first son was born. So I would say I don't know how to do it any other way. And the one piece of freedom that it gave me was, I think before my children were born, I would write and I would crumple. I was still writing on paper. I would crumple papers. I would throw things away. I would erase whole lines of text. And after they were born, I'm like, I don't care how bad it is. I'm going to keep it and come back to it and see what it looks like later. And I feel that was a huge help for me, that I did not allow myself to be frustrated by when things were going more slowly than I would like, or when I wasn't doing exactly what I felt like I should do. I was like, just keep going. It will come. Return to it. You've caught something there and you'll figure it out. And, I love revision. So that was never a problem.
Is revision your favorite part of the writing process?
I love revision. I am a teacher and I try to get my students to understand that it is a creative process. They think revision is fixing, like it was bad and now I fix it to make it better. And I say it's getting closer to the bone. Like you have the or actually my favorite metaphor is gross, but it works. Like when you first do a first draft, you vomit up the clay. Okay, you vomited the clay, you have a lump of clay, and revision is the sculpting. And how can you think that the vomiting of the clay is the end? It is not the end, it's the beginning.
What's next?
I am always writing poetry and I'm always writing a novel. The novel that I'm working on, I think, is about a woman who discovers that her parents altered her genetic makeup and she has to figure out why they did. I also love backstory. So if you want to move forward and backward in a book at the same time, you're my kind of reader. Like, what happened before? What's happening next? Some balance of that.
The book is An Impossibility of Crows, written by our special guest, Kirsten Kashock. The website is Kirsten, Kirsten, Kashock, KASCHOCK.com. This has been wonderful, Kirsten. Thanks so much for the conversation.
Thank you. You're really good at this. I felt so comfortable.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.